Welcome to the deep dive. Look, you're busy, you want to get smart on important stuff quickly, right? Without wading through tons of text.
Exactly. We do the waiting for you, pull out what really matters.
So today, we've got two things that seem, well, totally separate. On one hand, reports about China testing some kind of non-nuclear hydrogen bomb.
And on the other, the whole complicated dance between the U.S. and China, economically, politically, especially involving Taiwan.
Sounds like apples and oranges.
Maybe at first glance. But today, we're going to connect those dots. We'll explore the strategy behind them, what it all might mean.
Okay, so what are we working with? What kind of sources?
We've got media reports, laying out some facts, and also a discussion summary that digs a bit deeper, offers some analysis.
Got it. So your mission, listening in, is to really grasp how these seemingly separate things, this weapon tech and the trade maneuvers, might actually be linked strategically.
Yeah, let's jump right in.
Okay, let's start with this non-nuclear hydrogen bomb. What exactly are the reports saying? It sounds contradictory.
Well, the key takeaway from the media reports, apparently involving China's 705 Institute, is this claim of a huge explosion, like nuclear weapon level power. But crucially, without using any actual nuclear materials. No uranium, no plutonium, and no nuclear fission or fusion happening.
So how does that work then? What is exploding?
The mechanism they're reporting involves a hydrogen-based explosive, specifically a magnesium-based material that stores hydrogen as a solid.
Okay.
And the test apparently hit like 1,000 degrees Celsius, super hot. And the explosion itself lasted for about 2 seconds.
2 seconds. That feels like a long time for an explosion, not instantaneous.
Right. Not like a conventional high explosive or a nuclear blast. It's different. Think less of a single bang and maybe more of a sustained, intense release of energy.
So definitely not the kind of mushroom cloud we associate with H-bombs. This is chemical.
Precisely. It's a powerful chemical reaction, not a nuclear chain reaction. A Hong Kong media report actually gave some specifics.
Oh, yeah. What do they say?
They mentioned a test device, just 2 kilograms, generating explosive power supposedly 15 times that of TNT of the same weight.
15 times TNT from just 2 kilos. That's significant.
It really is. And again, they mentioned that fireball lasting over 2 seconds. It points to a fundamentally different kind of explosive energy release.
And it's being called asymmetric military deterrence. Let's unpack that a bit. What does that mean in practical terms?
Well, asymmetric usually means using unconventional methods or technologies to counter a stronger opponent's traditional advantages. So think cyber warfare, maybe?
Okay.
In this case, a weapon like this could potentially give you the destructive force similar to, say, a small tactical nuke, but without actually using a nuclear weapon. You avoid crossing that huge political and strategic red line.
Which means a country might be more willing to actually use it in a conflict.
Yeah.
Lowering the threshold.
That's the potential implication, yeah. It could make high-intensity conventional war seem, well, more feasible perhaps, without escalating straight to nuclear war. It also messes with arms control because existing nuclear treaties might not cover this stuff.
Interesting. But the reports also mentioned this magnesium hydride stuff isn't just for weapons. There are other uses.
Yes, the discussion summary brought that up. It's a classic dual-use technology scenario.
How so?
The rapid, uncontrolled chemical reaction gives you the explosion for military use. Boom.
Right.
But if you can control that same reaction, make it release hydrogen slowly and safely.
Then you've got a way to store hydrogen fuel for energy.
Exactly. Potentially a major breakthrough for hydrogen batteries, fuel cells.
Yeah.
Think energy storage, clean transport. Could be huge for civilian applications.
Wow. So military research potentially spinning off into green energy tech.
It happens. And the analysis ties this directly into China's big push for energy security. They want to be less reliant on imported oil and gas,
Makes sense.
And the summary pointed out China's been racking up hydrogen tech patents, like a big jump in recent years.
While other countries, like Japan maybe, have struggled a bit more.
Yeah, the analysis contrasts China's progress with Japan, which has invested heavily in hydrogen for years, but apparently hasn't quite cracked the whole industrial chain scale up as effectively.
Which leads to a really intriguing idea mentioned in the summary. Could this hydrogen progress actually open doors for, like, China and Japan to cooperate?
That's the strategic angle they floated, yeah. If China has solutions in an area Japan really cares about.
It creates a new dynamic, maybe even subtly shifts things with the U.S.-Japan alliance.
It could. Offering Japan a path forward on hydrogen might build some common ground, maybe add complexity to that U.S.-Japan security relationship. It's a possibility.
So this hydrogen tech isn't just about a new bomb. It's energy, it's alliances, it's changing the strategic chessboard for everyone in the region.
Including the U.S. The summary was quite direct. It said regional players and the U.S. itself need to be on guard. This adds a whole new variable.
Okay, fascinating stuff. Let's switch gears now to that other piece, the U.S. strategy, this idea of building an anti-China tariff alliance and where Taiwan fits in.
Right. So the discussion summary looked at Lai Ching-te's meeting with a Taiwanese American business group, and the analysis frames this as part of a U.S. effort, maybe especially with a potential Trump administration in mind, to kind of set Taiwan up.
Set it up how?
As a sort of model or benchmark for this anti-China economic bloc. Like, see, Taiwan is doing it, you should too.
And the thinking, according to this analysis, is that certain groups in Taiwan, those pushing for more independence,
are seen by the U.S. now as, well, more reliable partners for this specific goal. Maybe more obedient is the term the analysis implies.
a shift from maybe previously seeing them as potential troublemakers.
That's the perspective offered, yeah.
Right.
That these elements are now viewed as aligning better with U.S. strategic aims against China, so they're brought into this tariff plan.
The analysis also mentioned something about China's historical view, feeling strong enough now to correct past mistakes regarding Taiwan and Hong Kong based on Mao's foundation. That sounds quite assertive.
It does. The summary suggests a perspective within Beijing that they now have the power and the strategic position to address these long-running issues more definitively, according to their interests.
Now, the U.S. apparently tried this model approach elsewhere. Vietnam, Malaysia, Cambodia were mentioned. Didn't work out so well.
According to the analysis, no. Those countries seem wary. They remember past financial crises, perhaps, and they definitely see the economic benefits of trading with China. They don't necessarily want to get caught in the middle.
Cambodia even supposedly realized it was an error to lean too much towards the U.S.
That's what the summary suggested, highlighting how tricky it is for the U.S. to lock these countries into a purely anti-China stance.
So if those didn't work, the focus narrows. India and Taiwan seem to be the main candidates now for this U.S. strategy.
That appears to be the current focus, yes.
But the analysis throws cold water on Taiwan being the benchmark, doesn't it? Why is Taiwan seen as unsuitable for that role?
The core reason: economics. Pure and simple. Taiwan's economy is just incredibly tied up with mainland China's.
How so? Examples.
Well, the big one used in the summary is TSMC, the giant chip maker.
Like they were a leader.
Their new factories in the U.S., Arizona specifically, are reportedly losing serious money. Billions of NT dollars over the last few years. Same for Europe and Japan losses.
Oh, but what about their operations in China?
That's the contrast. Their subsidiary in Nanjing. Hugely profitable. And those profits are apparently growing significantly year on year. We're talking massive profits there compared to substantial losses elsewhere.
Well, it's stark. So the money's being made with China, not against it.
Pretty much. And it's not just TSMC. The summary pointed to Taiwan's overall trade surplus with mainland China and Hong Kong. It was nearly $70 billion in 2024.
70 billion. What are they selling mostly?
Electronic components. By far the biggest category. Stuff that goes into everything manufactured on the mainland.
Which leads to the big question the analysis raises. If Taiwan jumps onto this U.S. tariff train and hikes taxes on mainland goods,
how on earth do they replace that massive surplus? Where does that $70 billion come from?
the summary even mentions potential economic collapse for Taiwan if they went down that road.
It does. It paints a picture of extreme economic vulnerability. It kind of echoes what Putin apparently said back in 2022, that China could potentially achieve its aims regarding Taiwan just through economic leverage, no force needed.
So fundamentally, Taiwan's economic reality makes it a really shaky foundation for an anti-China tariff alliance.
That's the strong argument coming out of the analysis, yes. Very fragile.
Okay, what about India then? The other potential benchmark. Is that looking any more promising for the U.S.?
The analysis seems skeptical about India too, suggests it might just be a larger version of Vietnam.
Meaning similar issues.
Similar limitations, yeah. One big one mentioned is India's reliance on China for raw materials, especially critical in their pharmaceutical industry, apparently.
Can't just switch suppliers overnight for that kind of thing.
Not easily, no. And then there are the political wrinkles.
Yeah.
The summary points to things like the Sikh issue, the tensions between India and Canada, suggesting the Modi government might be kind of half-hearted about fully aligning with the U.S. against China. It complicates the relationship.
So, not exactly an unwavering ally ready to charge into an economic fight.
Doesn't sound like it, based on this analysis. It even speculates that maybe the U.S. focus on Taiwan is partly a feign while they're really trying to cultivate India, Japan, South Korea long term.
But with a warning, right?
Hmm.
China won't just stand by if these countries take substantial anti-China actions.
Right. The analysis suggests China might tolerate them being, bystanders, but won't let them actively harm China's core interests. There's a line.
Okay, this is all painting a picture of a really complex strategic environment. Let's broaden out. Potential flashpoints. The summary mentioned the Persian Gulf. That sounds risky.
Extremely risky. The analysis floated the idea that a potential Trump administration might try to stir things up there. Why? Maybe to gain leverage elsewhere.
Who benefits from chaos in the Gulf, though?
Well, the summary points out Russia could, potentially. More instability there could mean higher oil prices and more reliance on Russian energy.
Ah, interesting angle. But then, back to China's hydrogen tech.
Yeah.
If they become less reliant on Middle East oil because of it.
That potentially limits the scope for that kind of U.S.-Russia dynamic around energy security, doesn't it? It reduces China's vulnerability to Gulf disruptions.
It all connects back. Okay, so besides the Gulf, where else might the U.S. apply pressure, according to this analysis? South China Sea.
That's mentioned, yes. Using tensions there may be involving the Philippines as a way to lean on China.
Lean on them for what?
The summary suggests it could be linked to financial pressure, like trying to extort China into buying more U.S. Treasury bonds, stabilizing the U.S. financial situation.
Wow. Using security tensions for financial leverage.
That's the interpretation offered, but it also says China's stance is firm. No way. Not unless the U.S. accepts that the Pacific is big enough for both militaries.
That's a precondition for dialogue.
That's what's presented, and there's another stark warning in there. If the U.S. pushes too hard using the Philippines,
China might react strongly against the Marcos administration.
the summary suggests China might feel compelled to teach the Philippines a lesson, potentially forcing the U.S. into a position where they might even withdraw from the Western Pacific.
Abandoning an ally like the Philippines, that would have huge ripple effects, surely, with Japan, South Korea.
Massive consequences, the analysis points that out. It could trigger a whole cascade questioning U.S. commitment across the board. It's a high-stakes game.
Definitely a precarious situation. So let's try and tie these threads together. We started with this non-nuclear hydrogen bomb.
Which isn't just a weapon. It's a potential game changer militarily, maybe giving options below the nuclear threshold, but also potentially revolutionary for energy.
And then we have the U.S. push for an anti-China economic front, trying to use Taiwan as a model.
But running headlong into the brick wall of economic reality. Taiwan's deep ties to the mainland economy make that strategy incredibly difficult, maybe even impossible.
So the tech advancement offers China new kinds of leverage, both hard power and maybe energy independence.
While the economic interdependence seriously complicates U.S. efforts to isolate China or build that coalition, the two pieces are absolutely linked.
It really shows how technology and economics are just completely intertwined in shaping geopolitics today.
Couldn't have said it better myself. The hydrogen tech gives China strategic options, while the economic ties limit America's options in some ways.
Okay, that was a real deep dive. Lots to think about. So for you listening, here's something to mull over. Looking at this interplay, the new hydrogen potential, the economic constraints on alliances, what do you think are the most likely scenarios for the region in the next few years? More stability? Less?
And maybe think about what other factors, maybe things we haven't even touched on, could suddenly shift this whole complex picture. How does technological innovation versus deep economic entanglement really play out on the world stage? Keep thinking.
Definitely food for thought.
Yep.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.